Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Professor. I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, a little bit better today. Not 100%, but I would say about 80%, which is pretty good. Um, Today, well, first of all, are there any questions before I start? Anyone has any questions? Now, the final exam, the date for the final exam is December the 15th from 1 to 2:50 p.m. So the exam will start at 1 and will end at 2:50 p.m. And that's December 15th. So please make sure that you write that down on your calendars to remind you. And I'm sure most of you know when the exams are, because if you go to your portal, student portal, it tells you exactly when each exam is based on the courses you're taking. So, but anyway, I just felt that it's a good idea to at least let you know when the final exam is. Okay, today what we want to do is we want to look at chapter 12, which deals with Islam as a religion, and also if Islam can be taken as or can be considered as a solution to the economic, political, and social problems that the MENA region has been facing since their independence from colonialist powers. So at least, we will shed some light on the contributions of Islam, and we will also be able to see if Islam has in fact solved, if not all, but at least some of the problems that the MENA region faced. Well, Islam is the solution. Is Islam the solution? This has been a rallying cry of Islamic political parties across the MENA region for so many years now. Thinkers and scholars have framed many of the political, economic, and social issues that the MENA region faces today in terms of the absence of Sharia laws, which are based on the Quran. So a lot of the scholars happen to put the blame on the reason why these countries have not progressed, have not advanced, simply because they feel that these countries have deviated away from using the Sharia law as the foundation to the social, economic, and political advancements. Now, the Quran, of course, is, as I'm sure all of you know, is the Islamic holy book, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca and Medina, two cities in Saudi Arabia, in the 7th century. Now, remember, Prophet Muhammad was an illiterate man. He didn't read nor write, but the Quran was revealed to him through the angel Gabriel. And when the Quran was revealed to him, the first um, um, verse in the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad was in the name of read, Iqra. In Arabic, Iqra means read. So this is actually like an order given. Iqra, read. And the Prophet Muhammad, he doesn't know how to read. So, what he's supposed to do here. And the verse, I'm not going to go through the verse here, of course. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم, and so on. It goes on and on. But what the verse really says to Prophet Muhammad is read, and you will be able to read, because it's all in the hands of God. God is the one that can make you read, and God is the one that can make you not read if He so wishes or decides. So, in other words, you really have no power, basically. All power belongs to God, and God can destine anything, basically. So, that was basically the first verse that was revealed onto Prophet Muhammad. And, the Quran was obviously not revealed all at once. It was revealed in stages, in phases, and the whole book was obviously compiled by different scholars later on and put into a book, especially those who scholars who were able to read and write. And as a result, the Prophet Muhammad would read these verses out loud to these scholars, and these scholars would write them down. And the whole thing was obviously put into a book, which we all know today as the Holy Quran. Now, there are so many verses, of course, of the Quran, so many chapters and verses, and each verse and each chapter was revealed for certain things to clarify, to amplify, to emphasize. Because remember, during the, or at least before the religion of Islam, you have all the Arabs before Islam became a prominent religion in that area. All Arabs were living in what we call times of Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah in Arabic means decadency, which really is based on ignorance, based on barbarism. That's what most Arab societies looked like before Islam came to the forefront. So obviously, Islam did make a lot of changes in as far as the Arab countries were concerned at the time. And it obviously, uh, you know, the changes that Islam made were pretty much beneficial to those societies, because it transformed those societies from Jahiliyyah, decadency, to more development, to more progress, to more advances. And you could see what the Arabs were actually able to do after Islam in terms of advances in knowledge, science, math, medicine. The Arabs contributed tremendously to all of those. And I mean, it's something that everyone knows today. The contributions of Islam to modern civilization. It's just impeccable, basically, what Islam has done in terms of its contributions to modern civilization. And so that's basically it. Now, political Islam today focuses on using religion to assert political power. It has succeeded in mobilizing the people in the MENA region during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. However, after the Arab uprising of 2011, political Islam began to lose most of its support. Why? Because of its radicalization and the use of violence, especially in Iraq and Syria. Now, obviously, Islam really has nothing to do with violence. However, It's those who believe that they are interpreting Islam and implementing Sharia law, happen to be using violence. But Islam basically has nothing to do with violence. Islam goes contrary to violence. It does not espouse violence in any way, shape, or form. And anyone who commits violence, of course, under Islamic law, under Islamic rule, there is a severe punishment that will await those people who actually involve themselves in any type of violence. But, however, Islam has been radicalized by groups such as Al Qaeda and ISIS. Uh, it has been, of course, taken over by these extreme forces. However, the majority, of course, the silent majority, has really done nothing to actually keep these extremist forces at bay. And as a result, Islam came to be considered by many in today's world as a religion that espouses violence, unfortunately. But as I said, if you really go back to Islam and read what Islam is all about, Islam is a religion of peace. That's the meaning of Islam. That's what Islam means. It's basically a religion of peace. In other words, the whole thing in Islam that we begin with is Assalamu alaikum. Now, Assalamu alaikum in Arabic means peace be upon you. So, this is something that is used in all Muslim countries, day in and day out. Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. This is all you hear, which means peace be upon you. So, obviously, you can see from here that Islam does not espouse violence at all. It's obviously a religion of peace. However, as I said before, you had this few radical groups or organizations, just a group of thugs, basically. That's all they are. The Al Qaeda and the ISIS, who obviously, took over the religion. Basically, that's all what they did. They just took it over and they simply used it to advance their own goals and objectives. So, again, Islamism is defined basically as an activity carried out by Islamists that seek to bring all elements of social, economic, and political life into harmony with Sharia law. Islamists are critical of current economic, social, and political conditions in the MENA region. They view them as unjust and tyrannical. Islamists do diverge in their interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, the Sunnah, of course, there are two basic pieces to Islam. There is the Quran, which is the holy book, and there is the Sunnah. The Sunnah is simply the saying of the Prophet Muhammad. In other words, we call this al hadith, or the saying of Prophet Muhammad. In other words, things that Prophet Muhammad did, we look at them as Sunnah. So a lot of people in the Muslim world happen to look at whatever Prophet Muhammad said or did as Sunnah, and they try to implement that because they feel that they will become a lot closer to what the Prophet Muhammad did or thought of. Or so the Sunnah is simply the actions, talk. Uh, Habits of the Prophet Muhammad, etc. That comes under Sunnah. So we have the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, and we also have the Sunnah. But the Sunnah itself, obviously, is pretty much predicated on the Quran. So, in other words, the Prophet Muhammad does not speak out of his own volition, does not act out of his own volition. He acts according to what the Quran implements, basically. So, now how to apply the whole of God's message to modern life is much debated in the Muslim world. In other words, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Islam as a religion was divided into two sects, the Sunni sect and the Shia sect. Now, within Sunni Islamism, we can distinguish between three broad approaches. What are those three broad approaches under Sunni Islamism? Well, number one, we have what we call political Islamism, which believes in using the democratic process through the formation of political parties and contesting for elections to gain political power. For example, in Turkey, you have the AKP party, which is the Justice and Development Party. That's what AKP stands for, Justice and Development Party, which has won elections in Turkey under the leadership of Recep Erdogan. So that's one way to actually gain power through political activism, if you will. The other broad approach here is what we call new Islamists, or sometimes this is referred to as al-wasatiyya. Al-wasatiyya in Arabic means middle of the road. That's what al-wasatiyya means, middle of the road. Sometimes referred to as Islamic modernists who happen to take the middle path in the application of Islamic teaching. This group is non-political and focuses on spreading the religion through peaceful means, i.e., through what we call proselytism or da'wah, means inviting people to the religion. That's what proselytism means, or da'wah. Da'wah is an Arabic word for inviting people to the religion. So everything is peaceful here. Nothing is done by force. Now, another type of al-wasatiyya is practiced by Saudi Arabia in the form of Salafi Islam, which is known to its detractors as Wahhabism, which, it takes its name after its founder, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. He was the founder of this group, the Salafi group, Wahhabism. Now, the third broad approach is the violent militants who believe in using violence to implement the rule of the Sharia according to their interpretation. For example, notorious groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. These groups do not believe in the democratic process, and they view modern nation states as illegitimate. So really, they don't believe in borders between nation states. They feel that these borders are illegitimate, and Islam should take over all countries. There should be no borders between them, and there should be only one leader, basically. So they don't believe in the independence of nation states. So those are the three basic broad groups in Sunni Islam. They are divided in those three categories. Shia Islam, on the other hand, is more organized and more hierarchical, but it is less vociferous. In other words, less divisive than Sunni Islam. So it's much more coherent, basically. You don't have these different um, broad categories that we just discussed under Shia Islam, like you have under Sunni Islam. So religious scholars in the Shia sect are not in agreement in regards to wilayat al-faqih. Now, wilayat al-faqih simply means the rule by the jurisprudent. In other words, wilayat al-faqih simply means that the head of state is has to be a religious leader, basically, like you have in Iran, for example. uh, Ayatollah Khomeini is basically the leader of the country, even though you have a president, you have prime minister, but when everything is said and done, everything really, in other words, the last word really belongs to Ayatollah Khomeini. Khamenei, I'm sorry, Ayatollah Khamenei, who happens to be Wilayat al-Faqih. That's what we mean by rule by the jurisprudent. This is something that we don't have under Sunni Islam. There is no such thing as Wilayat al-Faqih. In other words, under Sunni Islam, religious scholars play a very, very minor role. They really don't play that much of a role. And the reason is simply because under Sunni Islam, um, religion is something that is pretty much um, it's something that, how do I say this? It's something that no one interferes with. In other words, there are no representatives, there are no priests or no religious scholars that will stand between you and God. So the relationship is one to one and the direct relationship between you and God. That's it. No one else enters into the equation. That's as far as Sunni Islam is concerned. So we really don't have this wilayat al-faqih. Doesn't really mean much. We don't have religious scholars that anyone can be a religious scholar. In fact, during Friday prayers, when you have the imam leading prayers, anyone can actually lead the prayer uh, in a Friday sermon. It doesn't have to be a religious leader. Anyone from the people attending can actually go to the podium and lead the prayers, basically. Everyone has the same right. So you can't say that, well, because you're a religious leader and because you're a religious scholar, then, you have the um, um, right to actually lead the sermon. No, anyone can. If you feel that you are able and capable of leading a sermon, then hey, go ahead and do it. There is no such thing that will stop you from doing that. That's under Sunni Islam, of course. So that hopefully gives you a good idea as to the difference between Sunni and Shia. Of course, there are a lot of other differences, which I'm not going to go through here. In other words, this will take us back to history and will take us back to the differences that Sunni and Shia scholars had regarding who was supposed to um, take over from the Prophet Muhammad when Prophet Muhammad died, then who's going to take over from him? Who will become the next commander of the faithful, if you will? Now, according to the Shia, of course, they felt that um, Ali was supposed to be the one that takes over from Prophet Muhammad. Now, Ali, of course, is the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, and also he is the son in law of Prophet Muhammad. In other words, Ali was married to Fatima, who was the daughter of Prophet Muhammad. So they felt that, hey, I mean, Ali was the one that, because Ali was a scholar, by the way, and he pretty much learned a lot about the religion from the Prophet Muhammad, and he was extremely intelligent and very, very wise in a lot of the things that he was doing at the time. And a lot of people respected him for that. And a lot of people felt that he should be the one to take the reins after Prophet Muhammad. However, other scholars felt the opposite. They felt no, that we really should not give the reign to Ali, who was young at the time, but we should really give it to Abu Bakr, who was a good friend of Prophet Muhammad. And again, Abu Bakr's daughter, Aisha, was married to Prophet Muhammad. So they felt that um, Abu Bakr, he really contributed a lot to Islam. He contributed most of his wealth. He gave all of his wealth to in the cause of Islam, and they felt that this person really deserves to become the leader after the passing of Prophet Muhammad. So again, you see here, there was a difference in as far as the taking over of uh, who are going to be the leaders of the Islamic State after the Prophet Muhammad. And as a result, these differences led to this division in Islam between Sunni and Shia. And by the way, Ali did not, put any opposition to that. He said, that's fine. If you want Abu Bakr to be the new leader, that's fine. I'll accept that. And things started moving, and then after that, Umar, after the death of Abu Bakr, Umar took the helms, and Ali was brushed aside again. And then after Umar died, Uthman became the new leader. Again, Ali was brushed aside. And at all this time, Ali basically did not show any opposition. He felt, hey, this is so what? I mean, if I'm not the leader, that's fine. The thing is, we really need to promote Islam in the best way possible. This was Ali's goal and objectives. And then, of course, at the end, Ali became the commander after the passing away of Uthman. Ali became the fourth commander in chief, if you will, of the Islamic State. But that shows you some of the problems that existed in the Islamic world. And, we're still suffering from that till this day, by the way. We still have this huge infighting between Sunni and Shia. Even though the Sunni are in the majority and the Shia are in the minority, but still these two sects seem to be going at each other's throat. And, it's unfortunate, because Islam should be regarded as one religion and should not really be divided into these different um, sects. And of course, if Prophet Muhammad was alive today, he would be really, really upset to see what has happened to the religion of Islam in terms of all the violence that we see today, in terms of all the divisions, in terms of all the hatred. That's not something that the Prophet Muhammad really taught his followers to be or to follow in. So again, this is what it is. Now, let's move forward here. Now, let's look at the economics and finance within Islamic thought and practice. There is much diversity in Islamic thinking and practice concerning economic policy making. Islamic finance is divided into private finance, which is dominated by Islamic banking, and public finance, which is found in alms or zakah and waqf. Alms simply means zakah. Now, what is zakah? Zakah simply means that every Muslim must pay a certain percentage of their income to help the poor. This is a must because zakah is one pillar of Islam. So if you do not perform zakah, that means you are not a Muslim. In other words, to be a Muslim, you have to adhere to the 5 pillars of Islam. And zakah is one of those pillars. So you really have to give up a part of your income to help the poor. Now, where do you take this money to? You take it to an institution which we call waqf. Waqf is an institution that administers all the money that's being paid as part of zakah to help the poor. That's what waqf means. So there are 2 schools of thought pertaining to economic thinking in Islam. One is based on taking a holistic approach to interpreting and understanding Quranic injunctions, and the other interprets Quranic injunctions more literally, meaning on a sentence by sentence basis. So one takes a holistic approach and the other one takes a divisive approach. In other words, it looks at the Quran more literally and tries to translate it based on sentence by sentence. Now, the former school has originated in the Deobandi movement of India. And this is a defensive literalist movement, which is very, very close to the Salafiyya in Saudi Arabia. Now, the latter school belongs to the Egyptian ex-Muslim brotherhoods, who are largely middle-class professionals and religious scholars who take a broader, less defensive view of Islam. So these are the 2 schools of thought that we have in as far as Islam is concerned. Now, unlike capitalism and socialism, whereby the former puts more emphasis on the individual interest and the latter focuses on the collective or communal interest, Islam happens to combine both interests into one. Islamists place greater stress on ethics, justice, fairness, and personal accountability. Islamist thinkers view humans as regions, that is, as being or as beings basically who are endowed by God with the power to make decisions over the allocation of the earth's resources. That's how a human being is viewed by God. The human being is placed on earth by God as a regent, so as to make decisions over the allocations of the earth's resources. Now, regency confers power, but also responsibility. And this places a great burden on the rich and the powerful who have a moral obligation toward the poor. Islamists do not oppose wealth per se, but rather the excess of wealth and its use. So there is nothing in Islam that says that you cannot accumulate wealth and you cannot become wealthy. Absolutely none. Islam allows for all of that. But Islam makes you feel the responsibility of becoming wealthy. In other words, you really have to share a huge chunk of that wealth with the rest of society. Because after all, this wealth, even though you pretty worked very hard to get it and accumulate it, if it wasn't for the will of God, you would not have been able to amass or accumulate that wealth. So I don't care what people say, but in the final analysis, this wealth is not yours, and you cannot do with it whatever you want to do. There is accountability, there is responsibility, and that's how Islam views wealth. Now, they judge economic policies by their outcomes and argue that meeting the basic needs of the poor should take precedence over all other interests. Islam and Islamism will shape the evolution of capitalism in the MENA, just as Christianity and Christian democracy did in evolving German capitalism and Italian capitalism. Islam in the MENA region could mold standards of public and private conduct that could strengthen both economic performance and political order. Now, if we are to evaluate the performance of the two most important Islamic economic institutions, Zakat and Islamic banking, in mitigating the socio-economic problems that are prevalent in the MENA region, we find mixed results. The issues of widespread unemployment, especially among the youth, and the maldistribution of income have received very, very little attention by the above mentioned institutions. And this is a huge problem. Zakah basically focuses on short term handouts rather than on development goals. For example, one study in the Sudan found that investment in education had a far reaching effect on income distribution than zakah. So, Islamic banking, if you look at Islamic banking, in Islamic finance, the concept of charging interest on financial transactions is forbidden. Like, all of you know by now from all the presentations that you have given, that interest is obviously prohibited in Islam. You can't charge interest. And this is known as riba or ushri. And under Sharia law, it is not permissible. Islamic scholars assert that all financial transactions must be based on real economic activity that pertains to real assets. Also, certain investments, such as investment in alcohol, gambling, and armaments, are prohibited under Islam. All contracts between lenders and borrowers should be of the profit and loss sharing type. In other words, equity contracts are permitted, but debt contracts are prohibited. The justification here is to promote real economic growth and structural transformation in societies. In other words, Islamic finance provides greater stability than traditional finance, with a greater emphasis on risk sharing. Islamic banks were not hurt as much as traditional banks during the financial crisis of 2007 2009. And the reason why is simply because most of these investments were done on a share profit basis. Murabaha contract is a debt contract whereby a tangible asset is bought by the bank at the request of the borrower and then resold at a predetermined price by the bank. That's murabaha, which pretty much mimics traditional banking activities, basically. A musharaka contract, on the other hand, is a contract whereby the bank and borrower co-finance a project and will share the profit and loss of the venture. However, most of the contracts that take place within Islamic banks today happen to mimic that of traditional banks. The reason, of course, lies in the absence of institutional arrangements that promote transparency, honesty, and an effective judicial system. Islamists in power. Now, there are only a small number of countries in the MENA region that have adopted Islamic governments. Some with long experience in power, and others short lived. Examples are Turkey, Iran, Sudan, Morocco, Tunis, and Egypt. All of these countries have had experienced an Islamic government. Turkey, in 2002 national elections, the Justice and Development Party, supported by pro-Islamists, middle and lower classes, came to power, led by Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The party, of course, did not have an independent economic program, but rather chose to abide by the 3-year IMF plan that was negotiated by the outgoing administration. The economic plan consisted of 1, raising taxes on consumer goods, cutting agricultural subsidies, and reducing inflation and public debt. The AKP sought to promote foreign direct investment, emphasize the importance of private charities through zakat and NGOs in providing welfare services, and placed policy emphasis on the idea of a strong Turkish family. Under the AKP, the Turkish economy grew at about 7% per annum, and the national debt was cut in half. So you can see from here that the Islamic experience in Turkey has been pretty good. In other words, we could see the performance. Excuse me. I mean, it did pretty well. Now, the AKP, under the AKP, the Turkish economy grew again at about 7%, and the national debt was cut in half. So again, this was a pretty good performance by the Islamic government in Turkey. Now let's look at Iran and let's see what Iran did. Iran had the longest experience of Islamists in power. In other words, the Islamists were in power since the Iranian Revolution of 1978, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that took over from the Shah of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, who obviously was the leader of the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian economy declined rapidly following the establishment of the Islamic Republic. Why? Because of the 7-year war with Iraq, which really took a toll on the Iranian economy. You had close to about 2 million people die in that war. And Iran was pretty much devastated by the war, just like Iraq was. Iraq also had about 2 million people die as a result of the war, and Iraqi cities and villages were pretty much destroyed. So obviously the war between Iraq and Iran, the 7-year war, did not vote very well. And also, Iran faced a huge decline in oil prices during the 1980s. So this also did not help the Iranian economy move forward. The economy began to show signs of recovery in 2000. Public investment increased in social infrastructure, and food subsidies helped improve human development indicators. In 2001, poverty rates fell to 15%, which is pretty good. And development gaps between rural and urban areas narrowed tremendously. Another good improvement. And infant and child mortality rates plummeted. SOEs. Now, does everyone know what SOEs stand for? Anyone?
State-owned enterprises.
Very good. State-owned enterprises accounted for 72% of employment and 65% of investment. Now, that really tells you something about the private sector, right? What is the private sector? Nowhere to be found, which is a huge problem. Anyway, the regime's economic policies experimented with market-oriented measures designed to increase trade and private sector opportunities. So this is basically where the Iranian government were trying to set their goals towards, finding ways to promote the private sector and trade and foreign direct investment, and populist measures of subsidies on energy and food, and price controls. So all of these things were becoming areas of discussions in Iran, and they really had to find ways to find solutions to all of these problems. Okay, and then of course we can't forget to see that Iran, even though it has made huge strides in as far as scientific developments, in as far as improving their industrialization, etc., they have obviously faced a lot of obstacles. And most of these obstacles were pretty much engineered by the outside world, especially the US and Europe, that put a lot of sanctions on Iran, more so the US than Europe. Uh, and this really halted Iran's ability to actually move forward, to advance its economy, to reduce the poverty rate, and to have some sort of effective, uh, equitable income distribution. All of these things were a huge um, force, if you will, against the Iranian economy. And I don't know if the Iranian economy can actually get out of this predicament. Now, I know, of course, with the new administration under Biden, things may change, but I don't foresee any fundamental changes, to be honest with you. I think the sanctions will continue to be there because obviously, when you look at US foreign policy, the US foreign policy is dictated by the deep state, and the deep state really doesn't change from one president to another. It's very difficult. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a problem for Iran, and I don't know how they will be able to take themselves out of this predicament. It's just going to add more and more problems, especially now with what's going on in Iran, with the murder of one of the founders of the nuclear programs. Is a scientist, by the way, that was murdered in Iran. And, right now, according to the CIA, they're saying that Israel is behind it. This is only going to cause more confusions, more instability in the area. And who knows what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4 months time from now. No, nobody knows. It's just that, things are not very, very stable right now, and things can head for the worse. These are the external forces that countries sometimes really have no control over. And once they start to spread, it's very difficult to contain them. And well, again, this is what the situation is right now. Now, let's look at Tunisia. The Islamic Ennahda Party in Tunisia won election in 2011, and its ambitious economic platform sought to achieve economic growth rates of 7%, while reducing unemployment from 20% to 8%. It planned to achieve this through, number one, reforming the banking sector. Number two, providing training and educational support for the unemployed. And number three, combating corruption. And number four, promoting more trade integration with Europe and North African countries. However, The outcome of these policies implemented by the Ennahda were very disappointing for the average Tunisian. To be fair to the Nahda party, many of the problems that the Tunisian economy faced, again, we go back to the same thing, were external and beyond the control of government, such as the spread of global terrorism. Now, remember, Tunis is a country that is very much dependent on tourism. Now, when you had those few terrorist acts that took place in summer resorts in Tunis, it really put a damper on the tourist sector. And it obviously affected the Tunisian economy negatively. So, in conclusion, it is really very difficult to answer the question of whether Islam is the solution to all the economic, social, and political problems faced by the MENA region. In the first place, Islam as a political and economic system was not practiced in any country. Second, no single system can be expected to solve all of society's ills. Each system, whether capitalism, socialism, or Islamism, has its strong points and weak points in trying to reach optimal solutions. Now, the Ennahda was only able to achieve a 3.6% growth rate. The budget deficit rose to 6% of GDP, and it failed to attract tourism and foreign direct investment into the country because of the political instability and because of the terrorists' activities in Tunis. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we can say Islam has done. Now, there is a lot that we can, say about Islam, even though, I'm really not going to go into that here because it gets a little bit more complicated. In other words, we can take a historical perspective of the notion of Islam, and we can bring in the establishment of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt by Hassan al-Banna in 1928. He was the one that was actually, he was a school teacher, Hassan al-Banna. In 1928, he established the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which in Egypt, of course, which obviously at the time when the movement was established, it was established simply to bring independence to Egypt from British rule. And the movement did pretty well, was becoming really strong, and the movement also was instrumental in helping President Nasser to take power from King Farouk, depose King Farouk, who was thought to be a puppet of Britain, simply because King Farouk was a king that was appointed by Britain to rule over Egypt. And President Nasser, of course, overthrew King Farouk in 1951. There was the revolution in Egypt. And the Muslim Brotherhood were very instrumental in helping President Nasser take over. However, the Muslim Brotherhood and President Nasser did not see eye to eye on many issues. particularly social, economic, and political issues. They simply had different views. And as a result, they tried to get rid of President Nasser by assassinating him. There was an assassination attempt on President Nasser, which failed. As a result, President Nasser took a lot of these Muslim Brotherhood instigators, put them in jail, and he outbanned the movement outright from any political activity. And of course, the person that came after Hassan al-Banna was Sayyid al-Qutb, who actually took over from Hassan al-Banna. He became actually the spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood. He was very active, and also he was very radical in his views. He was much, much more radical than Hassan al-Banna. Hassan al-Banna was more of an evolutionary, whereas Sayyid Qutb was a revolutionary, much, much radical in his uh, speeches, in his performance. And of course, Sayyid Qutb wrote a lot of books, criticizing President Nasser and the rule of the Egyptian army. And as a result, he was put in jail, and he stayed in jail till the day he was hanged. Um, and during the time that he spent in jail, he wrote a couple of books which are very, very prominent in Islamic scholarly work. One of the books that he wrote was called The Signposts. Very, very important book. A lot of Muslim scholars are pretty much familiar with this book that Sayyid Qutb wrote, um, The Signposts. Um, in Arabic, it's translated as Ma'alim al-Tariq, Ma'alim al-Tariq, sign posts. In other words, in his book, what he was trying to say was simply that there are two systems. There is the Islamic system and there is the decadent system. And these are the signposts. So obviously what you want to do is you want to take the um, road towards the Islamic system and away from the decadent system. And According to Sayyid Qutb, President Nasser was simply following the other road, which is the decadent system. And he was doing everything to stop the Islamic system. And that's the reason why he was actually hanged after he finished his sentence, I guess, in prison. He was immediately hanged. Um, so yeah, those are some of the things that I felt you know. But as I said, there's so many things that we can talk about in as far as Islamic scholarly work, and we can take a historical perspective of Islam from the day of Prophet Muhammad all the way to present times. And, we can see that through the chronology, that, there are a lot of contributions, a lot of advances, a lot of improvements that have actually taken place. But as far as we're concerned, I think it's sufficient to stop right here. Um, are there any questions?
Could you explain a little bit of what the decadent system would include?
Yeah, the decadent system in Islam, usually, it is referred to in Arabic as jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah means decadency, which means ignorance, which means oppression, which means deprivation, which means arrogance. That's what Jahiliyyah pertains to, all of these things. This is what decadency, under Islam really refers to. And according to Muslim scholars, we should move away from all of this. In other words, we should build societies that whereby we don't see anyone being deprived, we don't see any arrogancy, we don't see any person who goes to bed hungry. We don't see any person, living in the streets. All of this goes contrary to Jahiliyyah. So, in other words, when we talk about Jahiliyyah and decadency, that's exactly what we have in mind. And all of these characteristics have to be taken care of under Islam. And that's what Islam does. Islam will make certain that people, of course, will have enough to eat, will make sure that people have jobs, will make sure that people are not being exploited, will make sure that people will be able to, visit a doctor if they need to, have medicine. All of these things are important in Islam. You cannot deprive people of these things. Education, health, jobs. These are a must. Because remember what we said at the beginning. What did we say about Islam? Why was man created in the first place? And why was man given the responsibility to allocate resources? Remember that. Man has to act as a regent only, as a representative. And will be made responsible. In other words, man will be held accountable for all the ill doings, whether it is, involving a country in wars, whether it is killing people, whether it is not sharing and distributing the resources in a manner that is equitable, all of these things, man is going to be responsible and is going to be held accountable in the day of judgment. So that's what Islam is all about. So Islam is obviously trying to make sure that a decadent society will not be permissible. Does this answer your question?
In much more depth than I was anticipating, but yes.
Okay, good, good. Okay, any other question? So again, please, just go over these notes very carefully. And, the notes, I think I did not post this, right?
No, it's not on
Okay.
titanium.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it today. So when I post them for you, please go through them very carefully because it really does open your horizon. When you go through these things, a lot of new ideas start to come out basically from everything that you read here. And all what you need to do is just trace them from one point or from one end to another because it all makes sense when you try to put them together, when you try to trace them with one another. Okay? Any more questions?
Professor, when are you going to provide the final exam questions to
Oh,
study?
the final exam questions. I'm going to pretty much, from now, you should be able to know exactly what kind of questions you're going to be seeing. Because if we go through the chapters that we covered, you pretty much know what type of questions you're going to be expecting. Like on this chapter, for example, on Islam, Now, the type of question is, what do you think about Islam being the solution to economic, political, and social problems in the MENA region? Give examples. And by now, hopefully, you should be able to answer that question from all the notes that I have given you here. Can someone answer that question if you see that question? Anyone? No?
What was the question?
Yeah. What do you think about Islam being the solution to economic, social, and political problems in the MENA region? Give examples.
I would probably approach the answer in a way that, Islam could be a solution in kind of a perfect situation, in that everyone was following the rules and everyone, had good intentions. However, in situations such as like Tunisia with, corruption and terrorism, it kind of puts a damper on the positive aspects of Islam and the purpose that it has.
Mhm.
So I would expand on those, but that's probably where I would start in answering the question.
Yeah, you could also look at the case of Turkey, look at the case of Iran, and from there, you should be able to determine if Islam actually was the solution to economic, social, and political problems or not. So yeah, then there are a lot of examples you can look at, and again, you need to read these notes, and but then again, uh, we will have a review session whereby we will go over the final exam, and we'll probably look at some questions that will be likely exam questions. But from now, I think you can start preparing by looking at each chapter, and just each chapter that we pretty much covered, and you can see that there are certain questions that can be asked from each chapter based on the notes that I have given you.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, then. So if there are no more questions, I need to move along. And I wish you all a nice weekend. And hopefully, I will see you on Tuesday. And
Thank
on
you.
Tuesday, we will pretty much cover the last chapter, which is chapter 13. And then on Thursday, if we happen to finish that chapter on Tuesday, then Thursday, we will do a quick exam review. Otherwise, if not, then we will do that on the next Tuesday. Okay. Today is what? Today is the 4th, right?
Today is the 3rd.
Oh, today is the 3rd. Okay. Today is the 3rd, and we said the exam is going to be on the 15th. Yeah. So that's about 12 days from today. Yeah, well, we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time. Okay.
Have a good weekend, Professor. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you very much. I hope you feel better soon.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Appreciate that. Thanks to all of you.